Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, to the folks joining in from different parts of the world. I'm Rahul Akanpal, and I'm part of the product marketing team here at BrowserStack. And I must say, this has been an excellent and an amazing journey for me so far to the opportunity to work with some of the brightest and the best minds in this industry. And today, I'm very excited to kick off our session for today, the mobile first approach to testing. This is the fourth session in the series that we're doing, Testing Reimagined. So we started out with talking about how to improve developer experience. We then moved over to discuss strategies to address device fragmentation. The last session was more around on the test maturity as well as how to scale your QA operations. And now we are going to discuss the mobile first approach. And the reason I'm very, very excited about this specific topic is there is a lot of interest in terms of this companies wanting to ensure that they have a unified and a consistent and delightful experiences for all their end customers, regardless of the device, the channels, and the mediums that their end customers are. However, due to the pandemic, there has been a massive and a very fast acceleration to this mobile first mindset. In fact, 75% of all internet traffic today is on mobile. So regardless of your industry or the region that you're in, it's very likely that the majority of your end customers are going to be on mobile devices. So for us as QA leaders and QA practitioners, it becomes very, very important to address this issue head on. And that is exactly what we plan to address in today's fireside chat. So before we get into it, one of the things that we love to do is to hear more in terms of where you're joining in from. And for that, we have this poll. There are two ways for you to go ahead and answer this poll. So the first one is to scan the QR code on the top left-hand side corner. And of course, I would love for folks to do that because we are mobile first is the theme of the session. And for the folks on the browser, you can also go in on slido.com and enter the code to address where you are dialing in from. And while we see the answers trickling in, one very interesting anecdote that I would want to share with the folks is during one of the previous sessions, we had folks dialing in or joining in from Mars as well. And for a very quick time, I actually thought maybe Elon Musk is interested in our session on developer experience, but it actually turns out that it was one of those creative guys in the audience members. Wow, so this is amazing, right? I mean, folks from Canada, in California, India, Ireland, Arizona. So this not only helps us address or make the session more relevant to a global audience, but at the same time, just wanted to share that the panelists today are also very globally located. We have David based out in Europe. We have Santosh and JeanAnn based in the East and West Coast in US, and then Nakul and myself based in India as well. Very quick housekeeping things before we get started. This is going to be a 1-hour session. And a lot of in fact, all the participants will be muted and then there will be Q&A at the end. But please feel free to add in your questions in the chat window. We will try to address it during the sessions. We'll also address it at the end live once the panel discussions ends. And for the questions that we are not able to address, we typically try to address that through emails that we would be sending to all of you. This session is being recorded, and of course, we will be sharing the recording with all the attendees as well. So a little bit about BrowserStack. We are the world's leading and the largest software testing platform out there. And the journey started almost 11 years back with Ritesh and Nakul co-founding the company. Nakul, who's also one of our panelists, is also the CTO, is on the call today. And within the next 1 year itself, BrowserStack grew to more than 1,000 customers. And since that, the trust and the momentum within the company has not slowed down. Fast forward 10 years to 2022, we now have more than 50,000 customers. We've launched several new products along the way in terms of manual testing, automation testing. We've had an acquisition of Percy for visual testing, some great series in terms of funding, and along the way have grown to more than 1,000 employees. And when I said we are the largest testing platform, I was very serious about that. And this is just some of the proof points to validate that point. Currently, we have more than 6 million registered users on our platform that use BrowserStack on a regular basis. more than 72 billion Selenium commands every year. Let that just sink in terms of the scale. And we are a truly, truly global company with more than 135 customers across the globe. And just one of the reasons for that is the fact that we also have globally distributed data centers, because I'm sure you as QA practitioners know how important it is to test without any sort of latency or poor response time. And that is something that we would want to avoid and have invested heavily in terms of the data centers as well. And finally, as I mentioned, we have more than 50,000 customers, ranging from individual developers to startups working from their basements and garages to some of the most largest and most complex customers around the world, like General Electric and NVIDIA. We have some of the largest banks like Wells Fargo and RBS also using BrowserStack. In fact, one of our panelists today, Santosh from BNNY Mellon, is another of our banking and finance customers, to some of the largest technology, e-commerce customers and companies like Discovery, Tesco, and Shell use BrowserStack as well. So with that, I'm going to now hand it over to our moderator for today, David Burns, to introduce himself and then take the session forward. So over to you, David.
Hello, everyone. I was good there and I muted myself. But my name is David. I head up the open source program office at BrowserStack, working on numerous projects that kind of help essentially BrowserStack customers that are open source. But you don't really want to know about me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce each of the panelists, ask them to come up, introduce themselves, really. And then from there, hopefully we can get started with diving straight into the chat. So I'm going to start with my manager, my boss, Nakul, over to you.
Hey guys, thanks David for quick nice introduction. I'm the co-founder CTO of BrowserStack. I mostly run engineering other than some of the other strategic initiatives. Yeah. Looking forward to some interesting questions after the chat with David.
Brilliant. Next we have JeanAnn. Would you like to come up and introduce yourself?
Hello everyone. Thank you for joining, by the way. And my name is JeanAnn Harrison. I have been testing mobile applications for 17 years, and I focus on system testing, and I've been doing that for over 20 years. And right now I work for a medical device company. So I do distinguish between quality assurance roles and testing roles. And I want to make that very clear that there is a difference in terms of responsibilities.
Oh, I might pick you up on that later. That sounds very fascinating. And finally, let me introduce Santosh and allow him to introduce himself further.
Sure, thank you, David, and thank you everybody for taking the time this afternoon, evening, wherever you are in your geographies to attend this session. I am from Bank of New York Mellon, as David pointed out, and as Rahul pointed out. I am the head of enterprise quality engineering, core engineering, actually. My boss is the enterprise quality engineering head, and he's the chief quality officer for the bank. So my role within the bank is actually a horizontal role, wherein I work with different CIOs as well as different stakeholders across the bank, across different lines of businesses. As you can imagine, this bank is a very traditional bank, so we tend to deal with different technology stacks, different applications, different layers, different types of challenges with regards to automation. Of course, pleasure to be here to be talking to you about some of my experiences in this chat as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I'm sure there's some. Oh, sorry, I've lost my screen. Some fascinating stories to be had there. I got started in banking, doing automation. It was on AS400s. It was a dream. Maybe a nightmare. Anyway, so as we move forward, one of the known truths in the developing as in software developing world is that mobile is slowly taking over, traffic exceeding desktop traffic, and businesses are having to like really embrace mobile. Like pre-pandemic to where we are now, there's been a huge spike, and I'm sure Santosh has seen some of it in kind of banking, but like before we get started, like I want to set that as the scene, is that like mobile is definitely growing. And I guess leading into my first question is, what are some of the reasons that reasons and the trends because of these reasons that companies need to focus on mobile even more than before? So I'm going to start with you, JeanAnn, and then I'll probably nip to you, Nakul, as follow-ups.
Well, because I've been doing mobile app testing for so many years, to me, it's nothing new. And I've been focusing on system testing or system integration testing, as opposed to testing just the application that we see on any screen. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't understand necessarily, and only focus on what is on screen. The thing is that there's I can get into detail.
I'm not stopping you, so go ahead.
Okay, there are four different architectures for mobile apps. And that's another problem that people need to understand, that there's different types of testing for each type of architecture. So you need to distinguish, one, what type of architecture, two, what type of industry you're in, and three, what type of people are using your application. A lot of times, if you don't mix or you don't use one of those perspectives, you miss a lot of the testing coverage. So I will say the four different types of mobile app architectures are as follows: mobile native apps, which are usually proprietary devices, but they can be just the phone or a tablet. Then there is hybrid apps, which is a combination of accessing a web server as well as utilizing the native apps or native features on the phone. For example, your camera or your audio.
Yeah.
Three is mobile web apps, which is strictly communication between a mobile server and your device. The last one, of course, is a mobile page. And that is the simplest of all four architectures to test.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think actually you've brilliantly set the ground there for kind of focusing on mobile, because it is not just one thing. Nakul, like you were nodding away with her. Like, what are you seeing in that sense, especially from customers and things like that?
Sure. So I think I'll take a little statistical step at it first, shot at it first. So if you, from what I researched, I think when we were building mobile cloud, and also I think when you speak to spend time with customers, and some of this data is actually shared by customers with me, which I didn't know. Out of the $4 spent today, $3 are spent on mobile, right? So 70% of money transactions are happening on mobile. Google obviously penalizes people if they're not taking care of their websites, and not just because they want to do it. I think users drop off if your website doesn't load in 3 seconds, right? So that's a huge business loss for all of us who are building, who have customers coming from mobile, and everyone is customer coming from mobile. Thanks to COVID, it accelerated all of the mobile usage. I would say it made everything on software, but I think the biggest penetration has been on mobile, because all of us just became slaves of mobile, I would say, thanks to working from home. But so these are some of the bigger, I think, trends. And and it's not just the biggest change, at least from my customer conversations. It's not just mobile app. Everyone obviously wants their customers to be on their app for higher stickiness and all that stuff, but their web traffic is also majorly on mobile. I haven't yet met a customer whose 50% traffic is not on web. It's not on mobile, sorry. So I think that's been a huge transition. Of course, mobile web is still not a priority for many because they're focusing a lot more on apps because they believe that leads to higher engagement and stuff, and they want to, for right business reasons, force their customers to be on apps. But they are getting serious about mobile web as well because there is a discovery still happening on web. And once you like it, then you install the app. So that's just my take on the market and why mobile is important.
Yeah, I know. I like, at least from my experience, it matters that way. And like a very, very long time ago, I used to do performance testing on front end, and like I remember when Wislow first came out and I was trying to get it going. You said people drop off after 3 seconds, but like it's after like 400 milliseconds people start dropping off if they don't have enough interaction, and it's huge. And so I remember having to measure all of that in a meaningful way, which then leads on to kind of I'm going to poke this at Santosh. It's like, how do you start defining what a kind of mobile first QA landscape might even look like? Like how would you approach it? How have you approached it?
So I think before I get that specific question, I want to add a little bit more perspective to the previous question as well, if that is okay.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think basically the industry aspect that Jean also mentioned plays a pretty critical role in seeing the adoption of mobile and the rate at which this mobile is being adopted as well. Like, I can give you perspective with regards to my experience with both Goldman Sachs as well as with Bank of New York Mellon. Goldman Sachs over there, I was like pretty much part of the consumer lending side of the equation, wherein it was entering into retail banking at that point of time, and pretty much laid out the ground for all the products in that specific area, which we call it as like now it is a consumer division, which is actually integrated into another division of their own. But the idea over there is that over there, yes, it is a retail landscape. And then basically, like a lot of people in the retail landscape actually use mobile as the preference. Like if you see the Apple Card project, that was completely mobile native driven, and everything that we had to test as well as develop was within the mobile space. Even if you look at the lending space as well as the savings space over there, that is also like, even though it was not a native app initially, it was mobile traffic. Like people were accessing the websites through the mobile platforms much more. Yes, we also ventured into the app after that at this point of time, combining savings, lending, as well as the investment management aspects of it also through the mobile aspect of it. But again, the flip side to that, like if you look at Bank of New York Mellon, it's a little different. Like the space in which Bank of New York Mellon is completely different. They are more like even within Goldman, there are divisions which are like C2C, B2B, and but my experience with Goldman has been on the consumer side. When it comes to Bank of New York Mellon, since it's an enterprise function that I'm supporting, I see all different variations, and I see that Bank of New York Mellon is more B2B. When you say like it is into custody space, into treasury services, into asset servicing, and all these are B2B, and a lot of backend processes are also there. So there may not be so much amount of retail exposure. There are certain divisions within the bank, definitely like investment management, etc., which actually have retail exposure. So the adoption as well as the journey towards mobile, I think sometimes we ignore the industry, but I think industry also plays a role in terms of the adoption, the rate at which the adoption is moving towards mobile as well. So that is something that I wanted to add as a perspective of that as well. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's good. That's really good. And then kind of like, I know this, it's probably a slightly different flavor of the same question as I've just asked, but I think it'll elicit a slightly different answer, is that how, like, because JeanAnn, you said there's these 4 different groups, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, and with what Nakul was also saying, is that people are seeing a lot of adoption in mobile, but not always, like and then obviously we have these desktop applications, so there's a lot of like different things that people tend to look at. How do you think people should approach kind of the desktop versus mobile, desktop and mobile test planning when they're thinking about their application? Like how, like this is kind of at a high level. Do you have thoughts on that?
Are you asking me?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, that's a great question. I would say, first of all, adopting automation immediately is not something that I would do. I want to understand, again, I'm going to go back, a step backwards again and focus in on the system integration testing. Understand the interdependencies of hardware, firmware, or operating system affecting software behavior. That's part, I think that really is where I found a lot of bugs and saving my company a lot of money. And I could tell you stories, saving people's lives, that I found things that in saving my company hundreds of thousands of dollars to prevent things from happening because I found something ahead of time. So planning is really important. I cannot stress that enough. And understand your customer base or your user base is very important as well, and how it affects the software. So software design. So you need to make sure you balance all these items to have a good testing approach and test coverage. The goal is, of course, to have as much test coverage as possible. So the way to do that is to plan out and understand what you already have, and then plan out your test activities. The thing, you can balance automation with your manual testing, but I would not say to just apply automation 100%. And I think that's a misnomer that a lot of managers seem to jump on, and they need to stop, because they're not covering. I think we all can say there are many mobile apps that simply do not work for my use.
Yeah. No, Marat, who was on the last, I think it was the last fireside chat or previous one. I'm not even going to try and pronounce her name because I will butcher it and not do it good. But her favorite saying, and is well, it's a saying that she has that I've fallen in love with, is that you do manual testing to do automation, to do manual testing to do automation. You have this like life cycle going around, and like no one thing is that
Right.
is the silver bullet. But then
Right.
like Nakul, like leading, like you've grown the engineering organization at BrowserStack, you've seen how our customers are using it. Like, how do kind of these differences between like mobile and desktop, and in terms of tooling and skill sets, like have you seen change over time, and how has it affected things?
So I think mobile requires a very different tooling set compared to desktop, though the principles of engineering remain the same from build, deploy, and test, I suppose. But the actual infrastructure, what you need, is very different because of the apps. Let's say mobile web is relatively, you just have to solve for fragmentation and system integration, which I think JeanAnn talked about. And the tooling, I can still stick with Selenium or the existing frameworks. But on the app side, the things get really different, right? There's the different frameworks. You have a lot of nuances of mobile devices come in because of, you could use a lot more systems, things which you can't use in browser testing. Browser testing, you are limited to browser. You don't use a lot of system, whether it's mobile, you still use a little more than desktop, but you're contained in that environment. App could access everything on a system, right? You want fingerprinting, you want SMS access, you want contact access and stuff. So the complications increases depending on the application. And of course, all the processes around how do you deploy, how do you sign the app, how do you distribute app to your QA engineering teams or to your beta customers. It just is, it's different and painful, right? Infra side takes a lot more effort from, I think, engineering life cycle perspective. On the skill set, as this gets more complicated, the skill set required, I wouldn't say require a different skill set, but it definitely requires learning all of this. And then not to mention the nuances of iOS and Android. They're two different ecosystems and two different beasts in themselves, which sucks the energy out of engineers completely. But I think that's its own issues of learning, like a talk about frameworks and the whole deployment, and both have very different deployment and testing strategies. So sometimes depending upon, I think, the sensitivity of the business, like JeanAnn again emphasized on who's your customer base is, who your market is, and who is using. I think depending upon your intensity or sensitivity of program would be different on testing, and that might require different teams in some cases for Android and iOS separately. And depending upon if you are doing long tail of Asian and other devices, that's a whole ball game in itself because of their own custom tweaks to the OSs and stuff. So it's been then the industry wise also there are challenges around DRM distributions, restrictions and stuff like that, which you want to make sure you are even doing it manually is so painful. I think people are doing it automation is like a probably its own nuances. And then if you're doing audio video testing and stuff like that, like in BrowserStack is testing audio on devices. First, building audio was so hard, and now I have to automatically test on audio on devices. I think some of my teams are pulling their hair out, and I'm not responsible for any of it. But I think there's a lot of complications and nuances around it, and that's probably a journey we are in. And I said we'll figure it out. But it's far more complicated than desktop, obviously.
Yeah,
my experience.
No, the video one just made me laugh. At my previous employer, that was part of my interview question: is how would you automate video testing? And the answer back then, I don't know what it is now, is you would try like make sure you can reach a certain frame, take that frame out, and then you just test that one frame against a golden standard, and then hopefully it's right. But that and now I'm talking like over 10 years ago, so things have moved on quite considerably.
Not really.
And they haven't. It's one of those things. The further we get through into the future, the amount of things that stay exactly the same. So sorry, I've digressed. But Santosh, you were nodding feverishly to Nakul. Like with tooling and things like this, how does this affect your processes that you kind of think about, or kind of you help with engineers? Like how does that affect anything like that?
So I think, yes, all the things that both Jean as well as Nakul mentioned play into that strategy. You have to upfront think about the planning before jumping into the implementation. Sure. Basically, you have to understand, like, for example, depending upon the application as well as the web application that you're building, understand the usage patterns. If it is an existing application that you're migrating to mobile, yes, you can see the demographics information to a certain extent to decide how do you want to go about tooling. But if it is actually a completely brand new application that you're actually launching in, then you will have to look into some industry standards in that particular industry, like lending, savings, etc., whatever that might be the case. What are some of the most important platforms that you would want to develop first? Like maybe depending, for example, if you're in the US, maybe you may want to build iOS and Android platforms, like you want to support specific versions and specific devices on that, and see the usage of that particular application, that particular device across that. Before you actually jump and diversify across different data sets or different types of devices, different types of operating systems, you would want to understand which market and which areas that you want to target first. So that definitely plays into the development strategy. That indirectly dovetails into the testing strategy as well. Because it helps you determine, okay, these are the devices that I want to test in, and also at which layer I want to test it. A lot of times, like this is also goes into the planning that Jean mentioned, is understanding that about the architecture, deep understanding about the architecture of your application. What are the different layers? What are the different components that you have associated with your application? And what kind of testing you want to do at what layer also plays into that picture. So for example, maybe a lot of that testing that you want to do, maybe 50% of that can be done at the backend itself. Front end, you may want to decide, okay, what is the testing that I cannot do from the backend that I want to do from the front end? Like, for example, maybe throttling of the network traffic from the device, or like maybe fingerprinting, or like those kind of use cases that you have, maybe you may want to actually definitely do it from the device standpoint as well. So these things definitely play. There may be a lot more factors like this, but it depends upon the application, the architecture, the market, the function of that particular application, the existing market, as well as the expected market of that particular application. So.
Okay. And so due to your level, I'm sure you interact and like help with kind of making sure teams are sufficiently have enough people. Do you like do you kind of like see if you can get a mobile only team, like from like most of the time, obviously we've got an iOS team, Android team, but then do you have a mobile team for purely just for QA, like for testing? I'm not going to say QA because that's
Thank you.
sorry. But for testing, like, do you focus on having like these individuals who kind of then focus on that only in your experience, Santosh?
So
Do you want me to ask the question again?
no. Like,
Okay.
Can you repeat that question? Yeah, I was thinking that was a question for Jean, actually. Yeah, so
No,
can you
sorry.
repeat that?
It's because I said QA and I used the bad word against Jean. So.
Well, interchanging is not acceptable, just saying.
I agree with you. I shouldn't have said that. So what I was saying is like you know you've gone through all this and you like there's a focus on a iOS team, potentially a focus on an Android team. Do you generally try have a mobile testing organization to like? Would you encourage that? Would you know what I mean?
We have a completely different perspective at Bank of New York. Like, I usually work with, this is in sync with my boss also to a certain extent. We believe in full stack quality engineers, like basically like similar to full stack developers. Basically, we introduce the concept of full stack quality engineers into the bank. And what do we mean by that? You don't have to be specialized only in certain areas. You should be able to understand the architectures, and be able to actually perform the like validations or like do the automation across all these different layers. Yes, different people have different skill sets. Different people are at their different levels of their maturity in terms of their careers. Yes, how do we actually make sure that we can actually empower them? So we focus on training a little bit more, and we uplifting our existing talent and make sure that irrespective of the challenge that they face, whether it is at the mobile layer, whether it is at the NQ layer, database layer, mainframe layer, doesn't matter. We want to make sure we can support everything. So that is a model that we adopt at the bank, rather than making specialized performance testing engineers, specialized load testing engineers or mobile testing engineers, because this is going to be endless at the end of the day. So what do we do, right? So we try to focus on full stack quality engineers. Yes, some people get there easier because of their experiences and because of their backgrounds, but some people get there a little bit, take their time, but we provide that curriculum as well as a learning path, as well as a helping hand in getting there as much as possible.
That's quite good. I kind of like it to a certain extent when companies do that. I'm not a big fan of throwing testing over the wall. It makes sense in certain circumstances, but this sounds like it's like you're part of the group no matter where you are. So I like that. So JeanAnn, you kind of have a lot of experience with mobile, and so what has been your biggest challenges with testing on mobile? Like you've obviously split out, like I've got these 4 different things when I look at the problem, but like what are your biggest challenges at a high level?
Well, I will say that one of the biggest challenges is making sure leadership understands where my testing needs to be or where my team needs to be. And that's one of the issues that management or leadership don't necessarily understand the complexities of mobile testing. And I think that is something that is the big challenge across the board, that unfortunately, they just see, it's easy because it's small. It's on a small device. And the other thing is that there's a difference between testing on a tablet versus testing on a phone. A lot of people don't even understand that, but there is a strong difference between the two. Mobile apps act differently with the type of device. Then you've got proprietary devices, and that's a whole complex situation. Yeah, so that's my biggest challenge, has been leadership understanding and trying to explain and accepting the time that is needed to test.
Yeah, I think that's a general complaint sometimes, is that sure. Setting expectations and managing those expectations over time, no matter if you're a principal engineer or a junior engineer, like those it's the greatest skill to learn, and has the greatest impact. But yeah, no, so yeah, and so one of the other things that you said that I found was fascinating was a tablet is different to a mobile device. I wholeheartedly agree. And like things are changing. We even had Jan in our previous fireside chat who was talking about like, one of the biggest problems is like keeping a spreadsheet of all these devices that I need to do, and then knowing that you know, Fred or Mary might have the best iPad at that moment, and you really need it. So like moving on to that, like Nakul, like you've seen a lot of need for real mobile devices, and so by mobile I'm meaning like anything that you can pick up and walk around with, essentially. Like, could you like elaborate on like what you've seen and how that's changed over time?
You mean the fragmentation of mobile devices?
Yeah, like the real need, like the need for like real devices,
Sure.
like why people need that, and then obviously there is the like fragmentation comes into it, but like the general need versus just like firing up
And
your
just
browser
to
and
quickly-
shrinking it.
Just to quickly jump in, I want to follow Nicole.
Oh, that is fine. I will
Okay.
allow you to do that, Jean.
Okay.
So
Sure, I think so. From my experience so far, I think when we probably, at least just our journey, when we started with emulator first, not even I think browser resizing. Browser resizing, of course, you could do always with BrowserStack, but the biggest complaint was it's slow, it's pathetic, and it's not like a real device, right? And there would always be nuances, and web testing might be less. In the app testing, the paradigm changes drastically, right? Because you don't have access to a lot of native features of the phone. You don't really know, is it the real, the performance changes drastically of your phone, the API failures and all of that stuff was, I think, a different ballgame. So that's been the biggest thing. And as the fragmentation, thanks to Android, has increased with the OEMs and models, and there's the flip phones, and I think the whole ability to, I think, see through this fragmentation is extremely important, because the experience on an iPad versus an iPhone and a mini is very different. So viewports and the minor OS stories that do major changes, like and I think Apple helps us in our business in some ways, so I wouldn't say bad things about them, but the minor versions, they do major updates in Safari browser, and the application behavior changes, right? The cookie policies, they change, the privacy, they smartly play around with those things, which I think the Bluetooth pop-up started adding in a minor iOS version and stuff, right? Which was a major game changer for so many application and ad businesses. Very small thing, which is probably a direct revenue impact, and how you capture markets as well. So from that perspective, having a real device and having this fragmentation nuance is extremely important from my experience.
yeah, no, I like from my experience, my previous employer, I was working on Firefox OS as one of my many projects over my years, and I honestly had a stack of 5 phones next to my keyboard whenever I needed to do anything. It was a fun project, yeah. Only 2, sheesh. But
Oh, I have more devices, trust me.
I am joking, but like Jean, you wanted to follow on.
Yes, first of all, I wanted to talk about the test environment. So one of the issues that people keep asking me about is on how many devices do I have in my test lab? And what I suggest is that you try to have a baseline type of devices that you need to test every day manually, and then access there are companies that have libraries of devices that you can access virtually and test. So you do need to test on the actual device. And one of the big reasons that I say this is, Nicole, you mentioned about battery. Battery affects temperature. Temperature affects whether or not your device lasts as long as it should, because it can burn out your CPU on your device. A lot of people don't realize that. However, an Apple from what I understand, and because I don't use Apple, I use Android. But Apple does produce a message to the user to say, hey, it's too hot, shut down, and it shuts down. So it allows cooling. But the other issue beyond temperature is also the idea of storage. How much storage is available? And that's one thing that I think people don't really think about when they're using their apps. How do they use the storage? How does their app use their storage? And that's one of a big challenge that people don't think to test. Another one is notifications, but that's another story. But I did want to touch on that.
No. The thing I found really interesting while you were talking there, and I kind of envisaged the crowd that's watching, is that both Nakul and Santosh were going like this, like they couldn't agree with you further, right? Like, and I fully expect the people in the crowd will be saying something similar. So I think what you were saying just was resonating. I remember my previous manager, the previous job, had to buy cloth shoe racks from Target to store the devices in, because it was because then it went into a Faraday cage that was then cooled, but if it was on cloth ones, the devices didn't get as hot, like exactly the things that you're talking about. It's when I saw it the first time, I was like, what? That's just a fire hazard. He's like, no, just trust me, it works. And so following on to that, Santosh, because you were nodding feverishly, like what are the challenges in building a device lab that you've seen? Like the age-old question: should we build? Should we buy? Like, what has your experience been, and like, how has it gone?
My experience especially has been different with different industries again. Like when I was with a smaller firm, I mean, like where the industry was like, they were pretty small, in, depending upon the budgets they had also to a certain extent played a role. But let me talk about the financial world first, and then I'll go into the other world. The financial world definitely, like whether it is Goldman Sachs or Bank of New York Mellon, comes with a lot of compliance restrictions and a lot of restrictions in terms of security, in terms of vulnerabilities also, right? Like, and they don't even allow us to have like the slightly older version of the browser on any of our infrastructures. Forget about like basically like it's a device lab or something like that. So these kind of restrictions on top of the challenge associated with the request to get additional hardware into these big organizations is also another thing that plays into this picture. And also the amount of time and the energy that goes into managing, upgrading, making sure that this device lab is up to date also is another problem. So we always tend to actually like buy an infrastructure versus building our own, if it is preferable, because within such big organization, it makes sense at an enterprise level to have a centralized lab which can be repurposed across multiple business units, so that we have the opportunity to do that. But if the business size is small and if you cannot afford such a big lab, then there will be a mixture, I think. So I believe like basically like you might want to actually have certain aspects of your testing done within the internal, container lab or some kind of device lab or whatever that is. But there are certain aspects that you do want to actually look for if there is a cheaper version that is available for you outside as well. So I'm tending towards buy versus building and maintaining that infrastructure, especially because of the fragmentation as well as the amount of time and energy it goes in terms of maintaining it as well.
Nakul, did you want to follow up on
Sure,
anything
of course.
there?
So I think my experience, because I have built two, one for my team and one for customers, I think is extremely, I think I have a little more control because I am the decision maker. Santosh, it's relatively easier for me. Yeah, I think just bringing on what JeanAnn said earlier, I think the cooling, I think the power, the battery, I think is a huge nuance for teams in-house. It's the nuance in building it for a large-scale infrastructure for customers, but in-house is a lot more painful because someone takes it home and forgets it at home. Someone left it somewhere which is not finding anymore. IT is not came to office, so you can't provision the device anymore.
or someone left it camera on in the night and the device is extremely hot in the morning. And so all these nuances are extremely painful to manage in office. Connectivity to for long running automation test, I think we struggled a lot because phones would keep disconnecting. And there's a challenge of managing it in-house ourselves until we move to our, we had to figure out a custom solution for our engineers to use BrowserStack for testing changes to our platform. It is still very painful, but we are still figuring out how to get it really good. And resetting the device. Every time someone has to reset a device, oh, such a nightmare. Someone mistakenly upgrade the phone, and then we had to buy another one because it got upgraded to newer version, and we need to test on N and N-1 for the stability of because we committed like the experience and stuff. And that's a straight $1,000 expense. Like it's painful. And getting a device an older version is extremely hard. Like these days, like you have to go to so many markets to get an older phone. So all of these nuances, I think it's just managing in-house lab, and then when you build to cloud, I think scaling and building the infrastructure. At some point, we have to figure out custom cables to be connected so that the toggling from the device would show on the Mac Mini, and after a few days, it will go off the Mac Mini. So every few days, someone will have to go and keep plugging, replugging all the devices. And at large scale, it just became unscalable. So we had to figure out custom cables for it. We had to figure out how do we host, because I had to put in DC. So how do I put it vertical? Do I put it slanted? Do I keep it on the rack? What should be the material of the rack so that it was two metals? It gets, someone is testing streaming, it gets hot, the rack starts, and someone, so all these nuances are extremely, how would you charge the phone if you continuously charge and it's like start bloating up? We had actual initial in the first year of version, we had like battery started bloating and opening up the screen. Thank God no fire. So a lot of these nuances we had to figure out as we started solving, and used to make a general purpose platform, and then different teams are using different Appium versions. Someone is using a different. How do you make a general platform where you could customize Appium versions? You could customize Safari versions. You could customize Chrome versions, Android, and that's Appium versus Selenium. People on different Selenium version. Chrome has a Chrome jar has a compatibility different Selenium jar versions. So these complications on phone to do dynamically was extremely painful. So, but I think a lot of these nuances, I'm sure like as companies get bigger, their nuances and different teams on different versions also get very complicated. So a lot of nightmarish days and nights. I don't think we have solved completely, at least the in-house one. Cloud is relatively in a good shape, but in-house is still a mess. Sorry, on to you, JeanAnn.
Yes, JeanAnn's raised her hand very politely.
I didn't want to interrupt because you did have very good points. But one thing that I don't think has really been communicated, and I want to make sure it is that when I was talking about temperature, one of the issues is that when you're charging your device and using the device at the same time, that does spike the temperature. Everyone knows when you're talking on the phone that it gets hot next to your ear. Well, if you're charging as well and for example, using GPS, well, guess what? That can burn out the CPU. So just make sure you understand this concept could happen. The combination of the two activities can actually affect the behavior of the device and, of course, the app. That's it.
Awesome. So we're nearly at time, folks. This has been really good. So just to the audience, there is a Q&A section. Please just kind of make sure your questions are there. Rahul, as one of my colleagues changes the slides, and then I think I know what's happening. So we have a QA summit coming up, and I've lost my notes, sorry. And so BrowserStack is hosting its first QA leadership summit this summer on the 7th of September. We have a number of specifically curated QA leaders that you can see on the screen. I think it's going to be good. JeanAnn was telling us how some of them are amazing. So we have people from Nikia, Zebia, and Teslio. We'll have sessions focused on building and scaling QA and testing, in an ever-evolving industry. So please click on the link that is in the chat so that you can register and be part of it. I think it's going to be amazing. And so I'm just going to do one final thing as we go into the Q&A, is that I'm going to offer a kind of very 1 minute to each of our lovely panelists. If there's any key takeaways that from today that you really wish people could take away, and then we'll just pop into some Q&A after that. So Nakul, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think the two important aspects which JeanAnn pointed out was the system integration testing. I think start from there. I think that was the very important piece, which I don't think we do a great job at. And second, I think we do create a test plan and stuff, but I think we need to get a little more rigorous about it, which Santosh called out. We do get into this whole automation first mindset and get into a lot of those things, while having a strong approach and more rigor on it would be very, very things we should incorporate. Yeah, we'll do that. Thanks, guys.
Cool. JeanAnn, your 1 minute takeaway?
Yes, I would say that people need to understand too the performance of your overall mobile app, and understand that there are so many issues involved based on the architecture. I think that's something a lot of people don't understand or consider when you're testing your mobile app. And also to make sure quickly that you need to test notifications with other applications. That is something I found, a particular bug, that one mobile app stepped on another mobile app notification. So just be aware that to consider all the options.
Yeah.
That's it.
Cool. And Santosh, to finish it off.
Yeah, I think two things, like don't jump into the implementation or trying to solve it through automation. Plan, take a little bit of time to plan as to what are your business needs, your domain needs before jumping into any kind of solution. Also, one size fits all approach usually does not work across the board. So you have to think about customizing your solution sometimes, especially teaching your leadership. I think that makes a lot of sense. As Jean pointed out, it's very important for you to make them understand that one size fits all approach is not going to work out. Yeah.
Brilliant. So thank you to all the panelists. I'm going to just do a few of the Q&A. And so thank you for everyone who's asked a question or voted up a question. I'm going to try get through the ones that I think are kind of important. And if we miss any, I'm sure we will try get a post out to everyone so that you can see as a follow-up, so that hopefully there are no unanswered questions. Right. So I can't. So this one is from Ayo. I do apologize if I mispronounced your name. What is the difference between mobile web and a mobile web page? I think this is alluding to something you said earlier, JeanAnn. What could you differentiate?
Absolutely. Mobile web app has functionality. A mobile web page is simply that, it's a page. It's just looking at the whether or not the page can be seen on a mobile app completely. But a mobile web page consists of, a mobile web app consists of functionality to interact with a mobile web server. I keep saying mobile web server. It's a web server, but interact, for example, a cash register. If you're purchasing something, that's functionality that's interacting with a server, as opposed to a web page, which is just displaying information.
Okay. Thank you for that. Here's the other one. This one, just because Nakul said it earlier and has experience of build versus buy. When it comes to mobile testing, what is the practical benefit of testing on a real device versus an emulator? I think this is a question that BrowserStack people get every day, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, I think we do. So I think it's just from an end user perspective, I think you are a lot more sure about your doing the testing on what the end user is going to test. I'll just start from there, right? So it's at least the real environment. Can I get the same performance and experience from emulators? Yeah, you could debate, and depending upon who is louder in the room can win easily. I suppose I would probably put it that way. Are there nuances which don't work on emulators? Functionalities wise, yes, I think there is a good enough documentation on internet on it. But even if your is a simple, let's say, an app, Sudoku app, which you probably say it, I think still all the things JeanAnn called about a real world end user experience, you will never get on an emulator.
Yeah, no, I know from experience that and this is something that both you and JeanAnn were saying earlier, of like, you know, you've got to focus on how the CPU is going to be, things like that, when it's hot, when it's not, and how that affects the end application and how people use it tends to be something you can never get in an emulator. And another major one that I've always seen, like there's as Nakul said, there's always nuances, but performance tends to be another one, is that you can't reproduce the same performance problems. So if your application is slow on a real device but fast on an emulator, you might never catch that. So.
Well, there's an important point of balancing out between using both, because I have done both, and I would definitely recommend to have a plan to use both.
Cool. Right, so let's see. This one's a very technical question, so I will open up the floor. Is when writing APM tests against mobile applications, do you recommend trying to write tests that run on multiple platforms, Android and iOS, or focus on one platform at a time and split your test suites? I know JeanAnn's always said not really automation, but Santosh, Nakul, have you thoughts on this one?
Yeah, can you repeat that question, David? I got a call in between, so I could not listen to the question.
Right.
One app interfering with the other app. So there you go.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So when writing APM tests against mobile, do you recommend writing it for one test for multiple platforms, or a test for specific platforms? So write once, run everywhere, or write for specific?
Wherever possible, of course, reuse is always encouraged, but in some situations it may be possible, in some situations it may not be possible. I think that actually dovetails into one of the things that I wanted to mention, is basically, if we can look into the future in terms of if there are opportunities for us to explore different ways of automating, where you can automate once and you can actually execute against any platform, that is the best future. Like, you will get the best ROI for that, but you should be cautious about it in terms of where it is possible, where it's not possible. Yeah.
I think I would probably just add one more point on what Santosh said, is just check, I think there's the impact, right? From a walk back from customers, where you are and what's the most important thing. If your usage is tilted towards one platform, you can obviously go more automation on one platform and provide a better experience. If it's split, then just keeping it in right balance might be far more helpful.
Cool. And with that, we are literally on the hour. I couldn't have planned that better if I tried. So
Good job.
Well, I didn't do much. It was all to you, Nakul, you, JeanAnn, and you, Santosh, for kind of actually taking the time to answer us all the questions. I and the audience greatly appreciate you giving your time today to go through these questions and being here and sharing your knowledge. I've learned a lot, and so it's really great. Yeah, thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Thanks,
David.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.